sounds like they were waiting on Mike Macdonald of the Ravens, the defensive coordinator of the Ravens. They were waiting on him the whole time.
Yeah, because the rumor is that Ben Johnson and Mike Macdonald had a farm. They were going to be the Washington and Seattle. It was just a matter of who went where. But yeah, Macdonald was rumored to Seattle and Johnson to Washington. But it sounds like, according to Seattle and how quickly this went down, that Macdonald was the guy all along. So there you go. Ben Johnson stays put. Washington needs a guy, and Seattle gets their young defensive-minded coach, not named Dan Quinn.
Handsome guy. He and Dave Canales can have a new coach handsome off.
That is a handsome off. It's a Brady Garoppolo sort of thing.
But let's be fair. Canales probably wins.
Yeah, Canales is and Canales is more of McDonald looks like he's kind of a shorter guy, whereas Canales has that rugged tallness about him.
Seattle goes from the oldest coach in the NFL to the youngest.
No, that's kind of an interesting. I didn't think about that.
He turns 37 in June.
Isn't it crazy? Man, I think about just being 35, 36 years old, and like McVay and some of these guys. It's just, and Lanning's that way.
Well, he's younger than Lanning.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about like the rise to the level for some of these guys.
But he is no Dave Canales in another sense, in that he is not as handsome, and he has not written a book about his porn addiction.
No, he has not.
I did find it interesting the Seahawks went from the oldest coach in the league, Pete Carroll, 72, to a coach half his age and the youngest coach in the league.
Well, and he
Thanks
started...
for paying attention to the show there, Buck.
Oh, I ran away from it. Did you already do that?
Yeah, we talked about
Just
it.
did
Nice.
it.
Yeah,
nice.
Just did it.
But, think about it. In 2014...
It's good stuff.
Like, he's an intern. He's a coaching intern in 2014.
Yeah,
and here we are... he was a defensive assistant, just general, for 1 year. And then he's their DB's coach for 1 year in Baltimore. Then their linebackers coach for 2 years. And then he goes to Michigan as a defensive coordinator for 1 year. Back to Baltimore as a defensive coordinator for 1 year. And here's a head coaching job. It's crazy.
Well, his results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
You're right. There's not a lot on that resume, but when he was at Michigan, it was a top 10 defense. And when he was in Baltimore, you saw their defense last week was killer.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of great players on that defense, but at the same time, they were number one in scoring. They were number one in yards per play.
Mm-hmm.
They were, that was the best defense in the league.
Yeah, and they did it with, look, Hamilton is all world, and I get Roquan Smith and Queen. There's obviously good players there, but it's not a defense just loaded with like all world guys. They play phenomenal as a collective unit, and their schemes are as good and as solid as anyone in the league. And they made great adjustments, and they were getting shredded early on by Mahomes and company, and they shut them out in the second half.
So you missed Friday, but we talked about the Wall Street Journal article that chronicled John Harbaugh and why he's so good. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting now because John Harbaugh is getting raked over the coals. Yeah. And rightly so for his game plan on Sunday.
See, I put that on, I put that on Monken, but
Harbaugh, the Wall Street Journal was pointing out that Harbaugh being a special teams coach is what makes him so good. It's part of what makes him so good because he doesn't have a playbook to fall back on, right? He doesn't have a set system that he must run. Most of these guys do.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my philosophy. This is what I do. This is how we're going to do it. John Harbaugh does not have that. But he has worked on both sides of the football. So he's just a football coach. And he's willing to meld different styles together. Unlike Ben Johnson, well, look, they all have their influences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Ben Johnson said, Mike Martz, Adam Gase. So I guess they all do this to some degree because they come up through working for different coaches and they put different stuff in, and it kind of becomes their own. They make it their own. But Harbaugh uniquely sort of nimble, right?
I hadn't thought about that, but it makes sense.
He's flexible. Yeah. And that's why they said, when Wink Martindale's a really good defensive coordinator, but John Harbaugh said, we're not going to do it this way anymore. We need something different. And he hired Macdonald. And so they're saying the same things about Macdonald as John Harbaugh in that he is very flexible. He tailors his stuff to his personnel.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Mike Martz, and Mike Martz, and I know people that have played for Martz, that have been around Martz, and everyone that I've ever heard say that Mike Martz is the smartest dude to ever come through the NFL. He he has forgotten more about football than most people ever know, but he was such a stubborn ass that he was really hard to get along with. And his schemes were really hard to work because people couldn't understand him. And like, there is that rigid approach where it can really kind of screw you up. I think John Gruden's this way in some ways. I think really smart people, and like you say, that are really dedicated to one thing, I do think that can be a detriment. I've never thought about that before with the Harbaugh thing, but it makes a lot of sense, being malleable and being able to fit different things under one umbrella.
And so it sounds like Macdonald is kind of like that, which is why John hired him, which is why John liked him. Yeah. Remember, this is the guy that when Jim Harbaugh went to John and said, hey, how do I get over the hump? He was at Michigan. He was struggling. I got to win a title here. How do I do it? John Harbaugh gave him two names. One was Jesse Minter. Yeah. The other was Mike Macdonald. He said, hire one of these guys. Well, he ended up hiring Mike Macdonald because John took Jesse Minter, and now they've flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And Minter is at Michigan. And Macdonald is in Baltimore. But either way, both of those guys, and Minter's a defensive coordinator too, but both of those guys are John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh swears by him. Jim worked with both of them too. And I think that's kind of the nature of the Harbaugh way, maybe less so Jim, but more John, is flexible, like you said, malleable. Marlon Humphrey's quote, I'll give you a Marlon Humphrey's quote on Mike Macdonald here, and then we'll take a break. But he said, he's doing a unique job, talking about Macdonald. I kind of have never experienced it. He's really having everybody understand the whole philosophy of mainly just the group of coverages, as opposed to, you got this call, how do you play this call? He's kind of saying, grouping these calls all together, like, what is the whole idea of this call? So I think he's done a really good job of kind of really helping us all be smarter, to where I know what the defensive line is doing. I also know what the linebacker is doing. I also know what the safety is doing, because the reason why I call this defense is because of this. That's what Humphrey said about Macdonald's defense.
Makes sense. I mean, I know a lot of times offense and defense, you very much get caught up into what you're doing, right? As an offensive lineman, hey, this is what we're assigned to do. But when you're a quarterback, you have to know what everyone's doing. And same thing on defense. A lot of times it doesn't really translate. The defensive line doesn't care what the secondary is doing, but kind of that broad 30,000 foot view sort of thing. And it's amazing sometimes when you get guys that come in that just have a different way of doing things, and then you see some success with it, that immediately people are like, oh, maybe this is a way of doing things, right? But that's how you get kind of the Sean McVays and their coaching tree off of that, where when people see how easily adaptable a system is, the NFL is a copycat league, and more people will jump on that, which is why I think you're seeing more 36, 37, 38-year-old guys get jobs.
Well, don't know if it's a good hire, but certainly comes with some pedigree. Yeah. Mike Macdonald. We'll see how he does as a head coach, but if he resembles John Harbaugh, and I know John Harbaugh had a rough Sunday, if he resembles John Harbaugh, that's a damn good hire.
Well, and you have a really good personnel guy in John Schneider. I mean, I as much as Pete had final say, look, John Schneider has done a phenomenal job of building teams there in Seattle, along with Pete Carroll, and now it's strictly Schneider's role, but I'm assuming he'll include Macdonald in this. And I don't know, if you're a Seahawks fan, I get it. I see why this is an exciting time, going in a new direction and kind of the young hotshot. Just hopefully it doesn't turn into Brandon Staley.
What an exciting time.
Exactly.
Go Hawks.
Right. For every Sean McVay, there's a Brandon Staley.
Yeah, like we all love the whiz kid until it flames out Adam Gase style, and
So you never really know.
No, you don't.
All right, Mike Macdonald, the new head coach of the Seahawks.